The room went silent. Every fork stopped moving. Every breath seemed to pause. Lillian Moreau stood frozen, her perfectly manicured fingers trembling around the phone screen. The color had drained from her face like someone had pulled a plug. "This must be a mistake," she whispered, her voice cracking for the first time in decades. Marcus remained perfectly still, his gray-green eyes steady. "It's not a mistake, Mrs. Moreau. But you, the clothes, the truck. You were carrying boxes like a..." Lillian couldn't finish the sentence. "Like a delivery worker?" Marcus offered, a hint of something dangerous in his calm tone. "Like someone beneath your notice? Like someone your daughter could treat as invisible?" Vivian felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Her mind raced backward through every interaction, every dismissive word, every moment she had looked through this man like he was made of glass. "You're Marcus Sterling," Lillian breathed, the name falling from her lips like a confession. "The Marcus Sterling. Founder of Sterling Technologies. Your net worth is..." "Considerably more than this estate and everything in it," Marcus finished quietly. "Combined." Across the table, Vivian's sister Margot dropped her wine glass. It shattered against the antique table, but nobody moved to clean it up. "I don't understand," Vivian heard herself say, her voice sounding distant and strange. "Why would you pretend to be nobody? Why would you let me hire you as a fake partner when you could have anyone in the world?" Marcus turned to look at her, and something in his expression made her chest ache. "Because I wanted to know who you really were, Vivian. Not who you perform for your family. Not who you pretend to be for clients. I wanted to see the real woman underneath all that armor." "And what did you find?" The question hung in the air like smoke. "I found someone worth knowing. But I also found someone so terrified of being seen that she'd rather hire a stranger than admit she's lonely." Vivian felt tears burning behind her eyes. Not from anger. From recognition. "You let me treat you like a servant," she whispered. Marcus leaned forward, his voice dropping low. "No, Vivian. You let yourself see a servant. There's a difference. And until you understand that difference, you'll never understand why I'm still sitting here." "What would you do if you discovered the person you dismissed as worthless was actually worth billions? What would you do if the walls you built to protect yourself turned out to be the very things destroying your chance at real connection?" This is the story of Vivian Moreau, a woman who hired a fake girlfriend because she was too proud to admit she needed love. A woman who judged everyone around her by their appearance, their status, their usefulness. A woman who was about to discover that the handyman she ignored was the billionaire who would change her life forever. But here is the twist that will keep you watching until the very end. Marcus Sterling did not accidentally end up at that agency. He did not randomly offer to help a stranger. He saw something in Vivian that she could not see in herself. And by the time the truth came out, both of their lives would be permanently altered. If you have ever felt invisible to the people who were supposed to love you most, this story is for you. If you have ever judged someone and later realized you were completely wrong, this story will hit different. Hit that like button right now if you believe everyone deserves to be truly seen. Subscribe and turn on notifications because stories like this will remind you why vulnerability is not weakness. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. Back to a rainy night in Portland. Back to a woman who had forgotten how to be anything other than perfect. Back to the moment one desperate lie changed everything. The rain hammered against the windows of Prestige Events and Design like nature itself was mocking Vivian Moreau's carefully constructed existence. At 32 years old, she had built her boutique event planning company from absolutely nothing. No family connections. No trust fund. No wealthy husband opening doors. Just 16-hour days, endless sacrifice, and a stubborn refusal to accept failure as an option. The office was empty except for her. It usually was at 9:30 on a Tuesday night. The cleaning crew had come and gone hours ago. The last employee had packed up around 7, shooting Vivian a look that was equal parts admiration and pity. She did not notice the look. She rarely noticed anything that was not directly related to the task at hand. Vivian stared at the spreadsheets glowing on her laptop screen, numbers swimming together in the harsh fluorescent light. The Morrison account needed final reconciliation. The Henderson wedding required vendor confirmation. The corporate retreat for Apex Industries was missing 3 key elements that would make or break the contract renewal. She rubbed her eyes and reached for her coffee cup. Empty. Again. You look like you could use 3 glasses of wine and a vacation. Vivian looked up to find Becca Chen standing in the doorway of her office, coat half on, bag slung over one shoulder. Her assistant had that knowing expression she had perfected over their 4 years working together. The one that said, "I see you falling apart and I am choosing to address it with humor because direct confrontation makes you defensive. I would settle for one night where my mother does not call to remind me that I am the family's eternal disappointment," Vivian replied, closing her laptop with more force than necessary. Becca winced sympathetically. Lillian strikes again? She has planned another one of her infamous Sunday dinners. The whole family. Including my newly engaged sister and her perfect French fiancé. Ouch. It gets better. Vivian stood and stretched, her spine cracking from too many hours hunched over a desk. She specifically asked if I am still alone or if I have finally found someone worth bringing home. Becca's eyebrows rose toward her hairline. What did you tell her? Vivian was quiet for a moment. The silence stretched uncomfortably between them, filling the space with unspoken dread. I told her I was seeing someone. Someone serious. Vivian. I know. I know. She pressed her palms against her eyes, as if she could physically push back the reality of what she had done. It was a moment of weakness. She was going on about how Margot is living her best life, how Philippe comes from such a good family, how they are already planning the wedding of the century. And before I knew it, the lie just came out. So what are you going to do? Stage a convenient breakup before Sunday? The dinner is in 5 days. If I break up with my imaginary partner now, she will spend the entire evening analyzing what I did wrong. Why I cannot keep anyone. How Margot never has these problems. Becca moved fully into the office and perched on the edge of Vivian's desk. This was a boundary violation that Vivian would normally correct immediately, but tonight she was too exhausted to care about protocol. There might be another option, Becca said carefully. Unless you know someone willing to pretend to be my girlfriend for an evening of psychological warfare, I am out of ideas. Actually. Becca pulled out her phone, scrolling through something. I might know exactly that. Excuse me? My friend Delilah runs a companion services agency. Completely legitimate. No funny business. Just people who need extra income acting as +1s for events, family gatherings, work functions. That kind of thing. Vivian stared at her assistant like she had suggested hiring a clown to perform at a funeral. You want me to hire someone to pretend to be in a relationship with me? I want you to consider all available options before walking into another Moreau family dinner alone and vulnerable. This is insane. Is it more insane than spending another holiday being compared unfavorably to your sister while your mother catalogs your failures in real time? Vivian opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. Then opened it again. She had nothing. How does it even work? She finally asked, hating herself for the curiosity in her voice. You meet with Delilah, explain what you need, look through available people, and hire someone for the event. They come prepared with whatever backstory you provide, act completely professional, and disappear afterward. Clean and simple. Clean and simple, Vivian repeated flatly. Hiring a stranger to lie to my family is clean and simple. Cleaner than explaining why your serious relationship evaporated between phone calls. Vivian turned to look out her window at the rain-streaked Portland skyline. Somewhere out there, her mother was probably selecting table linens and planning seating arrangements designed to maximize Vivian's discomfort. Her sister was probably trying on engagement rings and practicing her sympathetic face. Her stepfather was probably retreating to his study to avoid the entire production. And Vivian was here. Alone. Considering hiring a professional to pretend she was worth loving. "Send me the information," she said quietly. "Already done. Check your email." Vivian turned back to find Becca already heading for the door. "For what it is worth," Becca added over her shoulder, "you deserve better than what that family puts you through. Whether you bring someone real or someone hired, you deserve to walk in there with your head high." The door clicked shut behind her, leaving Vivian alone with her thoughts and the soft ping of an incoming email. She opened it. "Read the information twice. Then 3 times. Atlas Connections. Discreet companion services for discerning clients." The website was tasteful. Professional. Nothing that would suggest anything inappropriate. Testimonials from satisfied customers who had survived weddings, funerals, family reunions, and corporate events with dignity intact. Vivian thought about her mother's voice on the phone. The slight pause before asking about her relationship status. The way every question felt like a test she was already failing. She thought about Margot's engagement announcement, delivered with false humility and genuine satisfaction. The way everyone had turned to look at Vivian afterward, waiting for her to produce a partner of her own. She thought about 8 Christmases, 12 Thanksgivings, and countless Sunday dinners spent defending her choice to build a business instead of a family. Explaining that she was focused on her career. Promising that she would settle down eventually. Watching the pity in everyone's eyes grow a little deeper each year. Before she could talk herself out of it, Vivian clicked the contact button and requested an appointment. The next 2 days passed in a blur of client meetings and event coordination. Vivian threw herself into work with even more intensity than usual, as if she could outrun the appointment she had scheduled for Thursday afternoon. But Thursday came anyway. It always does. The address Delilah had provided led to a modest brownstone in the Pearl District. The building looked unassuming, almost disappointingly ordinary for something that felt so scandalous. Vivian parked her Audi and sat for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. Rain drummed against the windshield, blurring the world outside into impressionist smears of gray and brown. "You can still leave," she told herself. "You can drive away right now and tell your mother the relationship ended. Take the lecture. Survive the dinner. Move on." But something kept her rooted to the seat. Something that felt uncomfortably like desperation. She got out of the car. "Can I help you?" The voice came from behind her, and Vivian spun around to find a man unloading boxes from a weathered pickup truck. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with dark hair that curled slightly at his temples. He wore a flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled up over forearms that suggested regular manual labor. His jeans had seen better days, faded at the knees and splattered with something that might have been paint. A delivery worker. Or a handyman. Someone who belonged to this building's maintenance rather than its business operations. "I am looking for Atlas Connections," Vivian said, her voice carrying the clipped efficiency she used with anyone she deemed beneath her notice. "I have an appointment." The man straightened, shifting a box to his hip with practiced ease. He studied her for a moment with eyes that were an unsettling shade of gray-green. Something flickered in his expression. Amusement, perhaps. Or assessment. Something that made Vivian vaguely uncomfortable without knowing why. "Second floor," he said finally. "Door on the right." "Thank you." She brushed past him without further acknowledgement, her heels clicking against the wet pavement as she moved toward the entrance. She did not see the way his gaze followed her. Did not notice the slight curve of his lips as he watched her disappear inside. Did not observe that the watch on his wrist cost more than most people's cars. The agency turned out to be a single room with a desk, 2 mismatched chairs, and a woman who looked like she had better things to do than be here. Delilah Monroe was somewhere in her late 40s, with silver-streaked black hair pulled back in a practical bun and reading glasses perched on her nose. Vivian Moreau? She did not look up from her tablet. Yes. Sit. Vivian sat, feeling strangely like she was back in school and had been called to the principal's office. The chair was uncomfortable. The lighting was unflattering. Everything about this experience was designed to strip away pretense. So. Delilah finally looked up, her dark eyes sharp behind her glasses. You need someone for a family dinner. That is correct. Female presenting, professional, convincing enough to fool observant relatives. Exactly. Vivian sat up straighter, falling back on professionalism as a shield. Someone poised, articulate, and capable of carrying on intelligent conversation about art and culture. My mother is particular about such things. They usually are. Delilah scrolled through something on her tablet. I have someone who might work. Jacinta Reyes. Trained actress, conservatory educated. She fell on hard times a few years back, but she is one of our best performers. Completely convincing. She turned the tablet around to show Vivian a photo. The woman was striking, with sharp cheekbones and intelligent dark eyes. The kind of person who looked like she belonged in galleries and charity galas. She is perfect, Vivian breathed. Her rate is $500 for the evening, plus expenses. Non-refundable deposit of $200 required to book. Done. Vivian pulled out her card before she could second-guess herself. The transaction felt surreal, like watching someone else make decisions in her body. I will need background information, Delilah continued, all business. Timeline of your supposed relationship. Key details Jacinta needs to know. Family members she will encounter and their personalities. I have prepared a folder. Delilah's eyebrows rose slightly. Of course you have. Vivian handed over the manila folder she had assembled the night before. Photos of family members with names and brief personality assessments. A detailed backstory for the fake relationship. Talking points and topics to avoid. It was the same level of preparation she brought to any major event. Delilah flipped through it with professional interest. Thorough. I like thorough. I run an event planning company. Preparation is not optional. Clearly. Delilah set down the folder and met Vivian's eyes directly. One more thing. Jacinta is a professional. She will play whatever role you need. But she is not a miracle worker. If your family is determined to find problems, they will find problems. Understand? I understand. Good. I will have Jacinta contact you to schedule a preparation meeting before the event. Usually we recommend at least one session to get the story straight. Vivian nodded, standing to leave. Thank you. Good luck. You are going to need it. The words followed Vivian out of the office and down the stairs. She was so focused on processing what she had just done that she nearly collided with someone in the building's narrow hallway. Boxes. So many boxes. Stacked so high she could barely see the person carrying them. Watch where you are going, she snapped, sidestepping to avoid disaster. The boxes shifted dangerously, and for a moment she thought they would all come crashing down. But the person carrying them steadied with surprising grace, and over the cardboard barrier, those gray-green eyes met hers again. The handyman from outside. Apologies, he said, and there was something in his voice that felt like mockery disguised as warmth. I will try to be more invisible next time. Vivian did not respond. She was already walking away, already dismissing him from her thoughts as thoroughly as she dismissed anyone who did not fit into her carefully curated world. She did not look back. If she had, she might have noticed him watching her leave with an expression that was far too knowing for a simple delivery worker. She might have wondered why a man hauling boxes wore a watch that cost more than her car. She might have paid attention to the way he carried himself, confident and assured despite the manual labor. But Vivienne Moreau was too focused on her own desperate plans to notice anything except her own reflection. That would change. Soon. Let me tell you something about Vivienne that she would never admit to herself. She was not born with walls around her heart. Nobody is. Those walls were built one brick at a time, through years of pain and rejection and desperate self-protection. To understand who she had become, we need to go back. Back before the successful company. Before the designer clothes and the expensive apartment. Back to a moment when everything she believed about her worth came crashing down around her. 5 years earlier. The rejection letter sat on Vivienne's kitchen table like a living thing. Its crisp white paper seemed to glow in the morning light, accusatory and final. We regret to inform you that your business loan application has been declined. She had read it 17 times. She knew every word by heart. And still, each reading felt like a fresh wound being torn open. Her apartment was small, a studio in a building that smelled like mildew and broken dreams. The kitchen was barely functional. The heating worked when it felt like it. But it was hers, paid for with her own money, and she had convinced herself that was enough. Her phone rang. The name on the screen made her stomach clench. Hello, Margot. Vivienne, darling, I just heard about the loan. Her half-sister's voice dripped with sympathy that felt more like condescension. Mother told me. I am so sorry. Of course Mother told her. Lillian Moreau collected failures the way other people collected stamps, and Vivienne's failures were apparently premium specimens. These things happen, Vivienne said flatly. You know, you can still come work for me. The gallery is doing wonderfully, and I could really use someone to handle the administrative side while I focus on curation. Someone. Not a partner. Not an equal. Someone to handle paperwork while Margot floated through the glamorous parts. I appreciate the offer, Vivienne said through gritted teeth, but I am going to make this work. Vivienne, be realistic. Margot's sigh was perfectly practiced. You have been rejected by 3 banks now. Maybe this is the universe telling you something. The universe can go to hell. Silence on the other end. Then a small, surprised laugh. Well. That is certainly one perspective. I have to go, Margot. I have work to do. Of course you do. Call Mother sometime, will you? She worries about you. No she doesn't, Vivienne thought as she hung up. She catalogues me. There's a difference. She sat alone in her tiny apartment, staring at the rejection letter, and something hardened inside her that day. Something that had been soft and hopeful calcified into steel. She would prove them all wrong. Her sister with her condescension. Her mother with her constant comparisons. The bankers who looked at her business plan and saw only a woman with big dreams and small credentials. It took 3 more years of working 2 jobs. 3 years of sleeping 4 hours a night. 3 years of sacrificing every relationship that required actual emotional investment. She ate ramen when she could afford it and skipped meals when she could not. She networked at events where she could not afford the appetizers. She smiled at clients who treated her like the help and swallowed every bitter word that rose in her throat. And slowly, painfully, prestige events and design began to grow. But the cost was everything else. Friends fell away when she missed too many dinners. Romantic relationships died from neglect. Family gatherings became performances where she proved her success while hiding her exhaustion. By the time she was 32, Vivienne Moreau had exactly what she had worked for. A thriving business. A beautiful apartment. Respect from her industry. And absolutely no one to share it with. We return now to the present. To the night before Vivienne was supposed to meet with Jacinta. To the moment when her carefully constructed plans began to unravel. Her phone rang at 6:15, just as she was reviewing the preparation materials one final time. Unknown number. She almost let it go to voicemail. But something made her answer. Ms. Moreau? This is Delilah from Atlas Connections. Vivienne's stomach dropped. There was something in Delilah's voice that telegraphed disaster before a single word of explanation was spoken. What happened? Jacinta got a callback. Last-minute audition for a regional theater production in New York. She took a flight this morning without telling anyone. The room seemed to tilt slightly. The dinner is in 4 days. I know. I am incredibly sorry. This is completely unprofessional behavior, and I can assure you it will be addressed. I do not care about addressing it. I care about having someone for Sunday. Silence on the line. Then a heavy sigh. I have looked through our entire roster. Everyone else is already booked for the weekend. I can refund your deposit in full, but I cannot provide a replacement on this timeline. Vivienne ended the call without saying goodbye. She stood in her living room, phone in hand, and felt the familiar sensation of everything falling apart. 4 days. Her mother was expecting to meet someone. The entire family had been notified that Vivienne was bringing a partner. The seating chart had probably already been adjusted. If she showed up alone now, it would be worse than if she had never said anything. The questions would be endless. The pity would be suffocating. Margot would offer that sympathetic smile that made Vivienne want to throw things. She needed a drink. 30 minutes later, Vivienne sat alone at a wine bar downtown, her preparation folder mocking her from the table. She had ordered a glass of expensive Cabernet because she deserved at least that much comfort in her misery. The folder contained everything. Family photos with detailed annotations. A timeline of the fake relationship she had invented. Conversation topics and danger zones. It was a masterwork of preparation, and now it was completely useless. She was on her second glass when someone slid into the seat across from her. Vivienne looked up, ready to deliver the withering dismissal she had perfected for unwanted attention. The words died in her throat. It was him. The delivery worker from the agency building. But he was different somehow. Cleaned up. The flannel was gone, replaced by a simple black Henley that fit him too well. His dark hair was still slightly disheveled, but it looked intentional now rather than careless. And those eyes. Those unsettling gray-green eyes were watching her with an intensity that made her want to look away. "Rough night?" he asked, as if they were old friends rather than strangers who had exchanged maybe 10 words total. "Excuse me? Do I know you? We have met. Briefly. You told me to watch where I was going while I was carrying 40 pounds of office supplies." Vivienne's face flushed with something that might have been embarrassment in someone less practiced at deflection. "I do not recall." "No, I imagine you do not." He signaled the server with an easy confidence that did not match his working-class appearance. "Whiskey neat, please. Top shelf." The server nodded and moved away, and Vivienne found herself staring at this man who had apparently decided to insert himself into her evening. "I am sorry, but do you make a habit of sitting down with strangers in bars?" "Only the interesting ones." "What makes you think I am interesting?" He leaned back in his chair, studying her with an expression she could not read. "You came into an agency that provides fake companions for social events. You were carrying a folder thick enough to be a dissertation. And now you are sitting alone with that same folder, drinking wine like it personally wronged you. You were watching me that closely? Hard not to." You move through spaces like you are always being evaluated. It is distinctive. Vivian was not sure if that was a compliment or an insult. She decided not to ask. I am Marcus, by the way. I sometimes help out at Atlas Connections when they need extra hands. Moving boxes, organizing files, that kind of thing. Good for you. Not really. It pays terribly. But Delilah is a friend, and friends help each other. The server returned with his whiskey. Vivian noticed it was an expensive brand, the kind that cost more per glass than some people spent on entire dinners. Odd choice for someone who did manual labor for mediocre pay. So. Marcus took a sip of his drink, watching her over the rim. The actress bailed. What is your plan now? Vivian's eyes narrowed. You were listening to my phone call? Hard not to. You were practically shouting. I was not shouting. You were definitely shouting. He set down his glass with a small smile. So what happens now? Cancel on your family? That is not an option. Why not? People cancel things all the time. Because Vivian stopped herself, suddenly aware of how pathetic she was about to sound. Because my mother will never let me forget it. Because my sister will win again. Because I have spent my entire adult life trying to prove I am worth something to people who will never see it. Because it is complicated, she finished weakly. Try me. The words were simple. Open. Without judgment or agenda. Just an invitation to speak honestly to a stranger she would never see again. Maybe it was the wine. Maybe it was the exhaustion of maintaining her armor for so many years. Maybe it was the fact that he was nobody, just a handyman who moved boxes, and therefore his opinion could not possibly matter. Whatever the reason, Vivian started talking. Because I am 32 years old and my mother still introduces me as the one who is not married. Because my sister is perfect and accomplished and engaged to a man who probably irons his underwear. Because I spent my entire adult life building a business, and somehow that means nothing because I do not have someone to bring home for Sunday dinner. The words hung in the air between them, raw and honest in a way Vivian rarely allowed herself to be. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, studying her with those unsettling eyes. Then he did something completely unexpected. He laughed. Your sister's fiancé irons his underwear? That is genuinely concerning. Despite herself, Vivian felt the corner of her mouth twitch. I was being metaphorical. Still concerning. He took another sip of his whiskey. So you hired someone to pretend to be your girlfriend to impress your family. Nothing wrong with that. Society would disagree. Society can go to hell. The echo of her own words from 5 years ago startled her. She looked at this man with calloused hands and expensive taste in whiskey and felt something shift. Something she could not quite name. Why are you telling me this? She asked. Because I know what it is like to have people see what they expect instead of what is actually there. He set down his glass and met her eyes directly. And because I might be able to help. Help how? Delilah is short-staffed, but she is not wrong that most people are booked. I, however, happen to be free this weekend. Vivian stared at him. You want to pretend to be my girlfriend? Partner, he corrected with a slight smile. You never actually specified gender to your mother, did you? You just said you were seeing someone. She opened her mouth to object, then closed it as she realized he was right. She had been deliberately vague, using neutral language to avoid additional questions she was not prepared to answer. This is insane. Is it more insane than hiring a stranger to lie to your family? Because that ship has already sailed. You do not know anything about me. I know you run prestige events. I know you planned the Morrison Foundation Gala last spring. Excellent work, by the way. The way you integrated local artists with the corporate donors was particularly impressive. Vivian felt her defenses rise. How do you know about the Morrison Gala? I was there. Briefly. Doing what? Moving boxes? Something flickered across his face. Amusement, maybe. Or something deeper. Something like that. And you think that qualifies you to pretend to be romantically involved with me? To fool my mother, who cross-examines potential partners like she is preparing for trial? I think I am your only option on short notice. I think you are desperate enough to consider it. And I think that underneath all that armor you are wearing, you are smart enough to know when to take a calculated risk. Vivian wanted to argue. She wanted to dismiss him the way she had dismissed him twice before. But he was right about one thing. She was desperate. What would you want in return? Money? I do not want your money. That threw her. Then what? Marcus was quiet for a moment, something shifting behind those gray-green eyes. Let us call it a favor. To be determined later. That is terrifyingly vague. It is also my only offer. Every instinct told her to walk away. This man was a stranger, his motivations unclear, his background unknown. The professional actress was one thing. This was something else entirely. But the dinner was in 4 days. And she was completely, utterly out of options. Fine, she heard herself say. But if this goes sideways, I will destroy you. Marcus's smile widened. I would not expect anything less. Do you believe in taking risks on strangers? Do you think Vivian is making the smartest move or the biggest mistake of her life? Drop a comment right now and let me know what you would do in her situation. And make sure you are subscribed because what happens next will change everything you think you know about this story. 2 days later, Vivian found herself standing outside Atlas Connections again. The rain had stopped, replaced by the kind of gray Portland overcast that felt like living inside a cloud. She had spent the past 48 hours researching Marcus Webb. The name he had given her. And she had found almost nothing. No social media presence. No news articles. No professional listings. Just a few vague references to consulting work and a business registration that led nowhere useful. It should have been a red flag. It probably was a red flag. But Vivian had built her career on calculated risks, and right now, this felt like the only calculation that made sense. She found him inside the agency, helping Delilah reorganize filing cabinets. He was back in the flannel shirt and worn jeans, looking every inch the handyman she had first assumed him to be. I have conditions, she said without preamble. Marcus straightened, that hint of amusement playing at his lips. I am listening. This is a business arrangement. Strictly professional. You will follow my lead on the backstory, and you will be convincingly charming without overshadowing me. Define overshadowing. My mother will try to interrogate you. She is looking for flaws. Do not give her any. What if I have flaws? Then hide them. Vivian crossed her arms. What is your rate? And do not say a favor again. A favor is still my only offer. That is unacceptable. I prefer transactions with clear terms. Marcus stepped away from the filing cabinet, and Vivian was suddenly aware of how much taller he was than her. Not threatening, exactly. Just present. Unavoidable. Then consider this the term. You get a convincing partner for your family dinner. I get the satisfaction of helping someone who clearly needs it. I do not need anything. Sure you do not. What is that supposed to mean? It means you hired a stranger to pretend to love you because you could not admit you wanted someone real to do it. It means you have built walls so high you have forgotten what the other side looks like. It means you dismiss people like me because it is easier than actually seeing us. The words hit Vivian like ice water. She took a step back, her professional composure cracking for just a moment. You do not know me. I know enough. His voice softened slightly. Look, we can stand here arguing about payment and terms, or we can spend the next few days actually preparing for this performance. Your choice. Vivian wanted to walk away. Every defensive instinct she had was screaming at her to retreat, to find another solution, to protect herself from this man who saw too much too quickly. But there was no other solution. And something in his directness, his refusal to be intimidated by her armor, made her want to stay. Fine, she said again, hating how often that word was coming out of her mouth around him. We need to meet to go over the backstory. I have prepared materials. Of course you have. Is that a problem? Not at all. I find your thorough preparation strangely endearing. Vivian was not sure how to respond to that, so she did not. Tomorrow evening. 7 o'clock. There is a coffee shop on Morrison Street called the Grounded Bean. Do you know it? I know it. Do not be late. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. And Marcus? This is not friendship. This is not connection. This is a transaction with unclear terms that I am accepting out of desperation. Do not read anything more into it. Would not dream of it, he replied, and there was something in his voice that sounded almost like a challenge. The preparation sessions over the next 2 days were unlike anything Vivian had experienced. She had prepared clients for events before. She had coached nervous brides through first dances and anxious executives through keynote speeches. She knew how to take someone uncertain and make them convincing. But Marcus did not need coaching. He absorbed information with an ease that bordered on unsettling. Names, relationships, family dynamics, conversational landmines. He remembered everything after hearing it once, asking clarifying questions that showed he was not just memorizing but actually understanding. Your grandmother Estelle sounds formidable, he observed during their second session, stirring his coffee with casual precision. You mentioned she is the original architect of family judgment. What does that mean exactly? It means she spent 60 years perfecting the art of polite destruction. She can compliment your dress while implying you are too fat to wear it. She can ask about your career while suggesting you have failed at life. She is a master. And your mother learned from her. My mother graduated top of her class. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. What about your stepfather? Harold seems like the safest family member. He is. He mostly hides in his study and avoids direct confrontation. He married into this family for my mother, not her relatives, and he has been quietly regretting it ever since. Do you get along with him? The question caught Vivian off guard. I suppose. He is kind enough. He just is not particularly present. Unlike your biological father? Vivian's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. How do you know about my biological father? You mentioned being the first marriage child. That implies a second marriage, which implies a first husband who is no longer in the picture. She set down her cup slowly. He died when I was 12. Heart attack. He was a factory worker, which is part of why my mother's family never approved of him. After he was gone, she remarried someone more suitable. Suitable. Wealthy. Connected. Acceptable to grandmother Estelle. Marcus was quiet for a moment, and there was something in his expression that looked almost like recognition. Like he understood something she had not quite said. So you grew up as the reminder of a marriage your mother wanted to forget. While your half-sister was raised as the legitimate heir to the new family identity. Something like that. That explains a lot. It does not explain anything. It is just context. Context is everything, Vivian. It is the difference between seeing someone's behavior and understanding their motivation. She did not know how to respond to that, so she changed the subject. We should practice physical proximity. My mother will notice if we seem uncomfortable touching each other. Marcus raised an eyebrow. You want to practice touching? I want to practice looking natural together. There is a difference. Fair enough. He stood and moved to her side of the table, close enough that she could smell his cologne. Something expensive and woodsy, completely at odds with his handyman appearance. May I? He held out his hand. Vivian took it, trying to ignore the warmth of his palm against hers. His grip was confident but not possessive. Comfortable. We would have been dating for 8 months, she said, grateful for the script to focus on. Long enough to be past the awkward phase. Short enough to still be in the honeymoon period. So we should seem comfortable but still attentive. Exactly. He turned slightly, and suddenly his other hand was resting on the small of her back. Light pressure. Barely there. But enough to make her breath catch unexpectedly. Like this? That is fine. You tensed. I did not. You absolutely did. He did not move away, but his voice softened. Vivian, if this is going to work, you need to actually let yourself be touched without treating it like an invasion. I am perfectly comfortable with appropriate physical contact. No, you are not. You treat your body like a fortress. Every touch has to be evaluated for threat level before you allow it. Vivian pulled away, putting distance between them. We are done for today. We have not finished reviewing the family photos. I said we are done. Marcus watched her gather her things, his expression unreadable. Same time tomorrow? Yes. And Marcus? She paused at the door. Do not psychoanalyze me. It is not part of our arrangement. Noted. She left before he could say anything else, her heart beating faster than it should have been. The night before the dinner, Vivian lay awake in her apartment, staring at the ceiling. She had done everything she could to prepare. The backstory was airtight. The physical comfort had improved, slightly. Marcus had proven himself capable of charming conversation and quick thinking during their practice sessions. But something still felt wrong. Something she could not quite name. Her phone buzzed with a text. Stop overthinking. Get some sleep. Tomorrow is just another performance. She stared at the message from Marcus, annoyed that he had somehow known she would be awake. Annoyed that he was right. Another text came through. You are going to be fine. I have seen you work. You know how to command a room. Just pretend your family is a client you are trying to impress. She typed back without thinking. Clients I can handle. Family is different. Why? Because clients only see the version of me I choose to show them. Family thinks they already know who I am. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Maybe that is exactly the problem. Maybe you have been so busy performing for them that you have forgotten they have never actually met the real you. Vivian stared at the message for a long time. Then she turned off her phone and tried to sleep. Tomorrow was going to be the longest day of her life. This is where everything changes. This is where every assumption Vivian has made is about to be shattered. Stay with me because what happens at that dinner will change her life forever. The morning of the dinner arrived with cruel sunshine. After days of Portland rain, the universe had apparently decided that Vivian's suffering would happen under a clear blue sky. She stood in front of her closet for 20 minutes, paralyzed by choices that should have been simple. The navy dress was sophisticated but might read as trying too hard. The emerald blouse with black slacks was professional but might seem too casual for a Moreau family gathering. The burgundy wrap dress was her mother's favorite color, which could be either strategic or suspicious. Her phone buzzed. Wear something that makes you feel powerful. Stop trying to dress for their approval. She stared at Marcus's text, then looked back at her closet. In the far corner, almost forgotten, hung a silk blouse in deep charcoal gray. She had bought it for herself 3 years ago, not for any event or occasion, just because she loved how it felt against her skin. She had never worn it. Today seemed like the right day to change that. By the time Marcus arrived to pick her up, Vivian had cycled through 3 different emotional states and landed somewhere between controlled panic and aggressive confidence. She opened her apartment door to find him standing in the hallway, and for a moment, she did not recognize him. Gone were the flannel and worn jeans. In their place was a charcoal gray suit that fit him like it had been tailored specifically for his body. His dark hair was styled rather than disheveled. He looked like a different person entirely. He looked like someone who belonged at a Moreau family dinner. "You clean up well," she said, hating how breathless she sounded. "So do you." His eyes traveled over her outfit with appreciation that seemed genuine. "That color suits you. We should go. I do not want to be late and give my mother ammunition." Marcus nodded and offered his arm. "Lead the way." The drive to Lake Oswego took 45 minutes, during which Vivian reviewed the key points of their backstory 3 times and Marcus listened patiently without complaint. "We met at a charity event," she recited. "You were consulting for one of the vendors. We started talking about art, discovered a mutual appreciation for contemporary sculpture, and exchanged numbers. First date was at the Portland Art Museum," Marcus continued smoothly. "You insisted on paying for your own ticket, which I found charming and exasperating in equal measure. I have commitment issues that I am working through. And I am patient enough to give you the space you need while still making my intentions clear." Vivian glanced at him. "You have memorized all of this perfectly. Is that surprising? Most people need more repetition. You absorbed everything immediately." "I have a good memory for things that matter." She did not know how to interpret that, so she focused on the road instead. As they turned onto the tree-lined street where she had grown up, Vivian felt her hands tighten on the steering wheel. The Moreau estate came into view, and even after all these years, the sight of it still made something in her chest constrict. The house was beautiful in that aggressive way expensive homes often are. A Victorian mansion with immaculate gardens, carefully curated exterior details, and an atmosphere that suggested you should be grateful to be allowed inside. Growing up here, Vivian had learned early that beauty and warmth were not the same thing. She parked in the circular driveway and turned off the engine. For a moment, neither of them moved. "Last chance to back out," Marcus said quietly. "No. I have come too far to retreat now. Then let us give them a show they will never forget." They walked up the driveway together, Marcus's hand warm on the small of her back. The touch felt different today. Less practiced. More real. The door opened before they could knock. Lillian Moreau stood framed in the entrance like a portrait of restrained disapproval. At 64, she maintained the ageless elegance that old money could buy. Silver-streaked auburn hair swept back in a perfect chignon. Pearls at her throat that probably cost more than Vivian's first apartment. Eyes that could cut glass while her mouth smiled politely. "Vivian. You are actually on time for once." "Hello, Mother." Lillian's gaze shifted to Marcus, cataloging every detail with practiced efficiency. The suit. The posture. The way he held himself beside her daughter. Vivian could practically see the calculations happening behind her mother's eyes. "And this must be your person." Marcus Webb. He extended his hand with easy charm, and Vivian watched her mother's expression flicker with surprise at the confidence of his grip. "It is an honor to meet you, Mrs. Moreau. Vivian has told me so much about your work with the Portland Arts Council." Lillian's eyebrows rose almost imperceptibly. "You follow the arts?" "I try to support local culture when I can. The Emerging Artists Showcase you organized last fall was particularly impressive. Very forward-thinking for a traditional institution." Something shifted in Lillian's expression. Not warmth, exactly, but a grudging acknowledgement that this man might be worth further evaluation. Well. Come in, both of you. Everyone is already gathered in the living room. The interior of the house was exactly as Vivian remembered. Pristine white walls. Carefully curated artwork. Furniture that was chosen for aesthetic value rather than comfort. Every surface gleamed with the kind of cleanliness that required staff to maintain. They followed Lillian through the marble foyer and into the formal living room, where the rest of the family had already assembled. Harold Moreau sat in his favorite armchair by the window, a glass of scotch in hand and a newspaper open on his lap. At 68, Vivian's stepfather had the look of a man who had made peace with his supporting role in his wife's productions. He was kind in a distant way, present without being particularly engaged. "Vivian, my dear." He rose to greet her with a genuine smile. "How wonderful to see you." "Hello, Harold. And you must be the young man we have heard about." Harold shook Marcus's hand with the warmth Lillian had withheld. "Welcome to the chaos." "Thank you, sir. I appreciate the honest assessment." Harold chuckled. "Already I like you. Vivian, where did you find this one?" "He found me, actually." Across the room, movement caught Vivian's attention. Her sister Margot rose from the settee with the fluid grace she had inherited from their mother. At 30, Margot Delacroix was everything Vivian was not. Blonde where Vivian was dark. Soft where Vivian was sharp. Effortlessly elegant where Vivian had to work for every ounce of poise. Vivian. Margot's embrace was as light as air and about as genuine. "You look well." "So do you." "Engagement agrees with you." "It really does it not?" Margot stepped back and turned to the man rising behind her. "Darling, come meet my sister and her mysterious companion." Philippe Renaud was exactly what Vivian had expected and somehow more annoying for it. Classically handsome with dark hair and warm brown eyes. French accent that somehow managed to sound sophisticated rather than pretentious. The kind of man who looked natural in family photos and made everyone around him feel slightly inadequate. "Vivian, I have heard so much about you." His handshake was warm and sincere. "Your sister speaks of you often." "Does she?" "She says you are the hardest working woman she knows. That you built your company from nothing through sheer determination." Vivian glanced at Margot, who had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable at having her private compliments exposed. "And you must be Marcus." Philippe turned with genuine interest. "I understand you work in technology consulting." "Among other things," Marcus replied smoothly. "And congratulations on your engagement. Margot must be quite special to have captured your heart." "She is extraordinary. I count myself fortunate every day." The exchange was pleasant, easy, and made Vivian want to crawl out of her skin. This was too civilized. Too comfortable. Where was the tension? Where was the judgment? "Shall we move to the dining room?" Lillian's voice cut through the pleasantries like a knife. "Grandmother is waiting, and you know how she feels about tardiness." Ah. There it was. The dining room was set for 8, with crystal and china that had been in the family for 4 generations. The centerpiece was a modest arrangement of white roses, elegant and understated and probably more expensive than Vivian's monthly grocery budget. At the head of the table sat the true architect of Moreau family dysfunction. Grandmother Estelle was 82 years old and looked like she would outlive them all through sheer force of will. Silver hair perfectly coiffed. Diamond earrings that caught the light with every slight turn of her head. Eyes that missed nothing and forgave even less. "So this is the man," Estelle said without preamble. "Come closer, young man. Let me see you properly." Marcus approached the head of the table without hesitation, his posture relaxed and confident. He extended his hand to the family matriarch with the same easy charm he had shown Lillian. "Mrs. Moreau. I have heard remarkable things about your influence on Portland's cultural landscape." "Have you indeed?" Estelle did not shake his hand. Instead, she studied him the way a collector might study a potentially valuable artifact. "What exactly do you do for a living?" "Technology consulting, primarily. Helping companies optimize their operations and implement strategic growth initiatives." "That sounds deliberately vague." "It is a complex field with many applications." Estelle's gaze narrowed. "Where did you attend university?" "Stanford. Computer science, with a minor in economics." Vivian fought to keep her expression neutral. She had not known that. It was not in any of their preparation materials. "Stanford is acceptable," Estelle allowed. "Though I have always preferred the Ivy League myself." "What about your family? Where are the Webbs from originally?" "Connecticut, originally. My parents relocated to California when I was young." "And what do they do?" "My father was an engineer. My mother was a teacher." "Was?" "They passed away several years ago. Car accident." A flicker of something crossed Estelle's face. Not sympathy, exactly. More like a recalculation of his value now that family connections were off the table. "I see. And you have no siblings? No family connections of your own?" "No siblings. And my family connections, such as they are, come through work rather than blood." Estelle leaned back in her chair, apparently satisfied with her initial interrogation. "You may sit down. Lillian, I am ready for the first course." Dinner unfolded with the precision of a military campaign. Each course arrived at precisely the right moment. Conversation flowed through approved topics. Politics, carefully. Art, enthusiastically. Business, with measured interest. Marcus navigated every turn with an ease that continued to surprise Vivian. He discussed architecture with Harold, demonstrating knowledge of Pacific Northwest design principles that made her stepfather's eyes light up. He engaged Philippe in a conversation about French contemporary artists that revealed a depth of cultural understanding she had not expected. When Margot tried to steer the discussion toward Vivian's perpetual singlehood, Marcus deflected with a story about their first meeting that was entirely fictional but completely convincing. "I knew she was special the moment I saw her across the room," he said, his hand finding Vivian's under the table. "She was handling a crisis with one of the vendors, and the way she managed the situation, calm under pressure, firm but fair, I could not look away." "And what did you think when he approached you?" Lillian asked Vivian, her tone suggesting she expected to find holes in the narrative. "I thought he was too persistent." Vivian felt Marcus squeeze her hand gently, encouraging. "Most people accept rejection and move on. He did not." "I prefer the term determined," Marcus said with a slight smile. "Stubborn is another option. I like to think of it as knowing what I want and being willing to work for it." Something in his voice made Vivian look at him directly. There was warmth in his eyes that felt entirely too genuine for a performance. "That is an admirable quality," Philippe observed. "Persistence in pursuit of what matters." "Some would call it obsessive," Margot countered with a light laugh that did not quite reach her eyes. "Perhaps. But I have found that the things worth having rarely come easily. Vivian is worth every bit of effort." Silence fell over the table. Vivian felt heat creeping up her neck and forced herself to take a sip of wine to cover her reaction. "What I love most about Vivian," Marcus continued, apparently unconcerned with the weight of attention he had drawn, "is the way she fights. Not against people, but for herself. She has built everything from nothing, and she has never stopped believing she was worth more than what people gave her credit for." The words hit the table like stones in still water. Lillian's face went carefully blank. Margot looked down at her plate. Even Estelle seemed momentarily at a loss for a cutting response. Harold was the one who broke the silence. "Well said, young man. Well said indeed." But Vivian noticed her mother's eyes narrowing, cataloguing this moment for future analysis. The interrogation was not over. It was just entering a new phase. The second course arrived, providing a brief respite from the emotional tension. But Vivian could feel her mother's scrutiny like a physical weight, and she knew it was only a matter of time before the real questions began. They came over the third course, as she had known they would. Marcus. Lillian set down her fork with the precision of someone about to launch an offensive. "I am curious about the nature of your consulting work. You have been rather vague about the specifics. The nature of consulting often requires discretion about client matters." "Of course. But surely you can share something about your general activities? Your typical day, perhaps?" Marcus took a measured sip of his wine before responding. "I work with companies undergoing transition. Helping them identify inefficiencies, implement new systems, develop leadership capacity. It varies depending on the client's needs." "And is this lucrative work?" The question was blunt enough to make Philippe wince slightly. Margot watched with poorly concealed interest. Harold retreated further behind his newspaper, clearly wishing he were anywhere else. "It provides a comfortable living," Marcus replied evenly. "Comfortable?" Lillian's tone suggested this was not enough. "My daughter has worked exceptionally hard to build her business. She has made considerable sacrifices to achieve her success. I would hate to see her supporting someone who cannot contribute equally to a partnership." "Mother." Vivian's voice was sharp. "It is a fair question, darling. We are simply trying to understand this young man's circumstances. His circumstances are none of your business. They become my business when they affect your future." Marcus raised a hand slightly, drawing attention back to himself. "Mrs. Moreau, I understand your concern. You want to protect your daughter from potential exploitation. It is a reasonable instinct. I am glad you see it that way. However, I should point out that Vivian is more than capable of protecting herself. She does not need me to provide for her, and she would not tolerate it if I tried. What I offer is partnership, not dependency. Partnership requires resources. Can you match what she brings to the table?" The directness was almost refreshing after years of Lillian's carefully veiled insults. But the implication behind the question made Vivian's blood boil. "I believe what I bring to the table is not measured purely in financial terms. Young man, let us not be naive. Love is wonderful, but stability requires practical considerations." "Then let me be practical." Something shifted in Marcus's voice. A steel that had not been there before. "You want to know if I am worthy of your daughter. Whether I can provide for her. Whether I am using her for her success." Bluntly? "Yes." "Then let me be equally blunt." He reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. A few taps on the screen, and then he handed it across the table to Lillian. Vivian watched her mother's face as she looked at whatever was on that screen. The blood drained from Lillian's cheeks. Her perfectly composed expression cracked for the first time in Vivian's memory. "This must be a mistake." "It is not a mistake." "But you said, the consulting, the—" Lillian looked up, her voice strangled. "You are Marcus Sterling." The Marcus Sterling. The name hit the room like a thunderclap. Marcus Sterling. Founder of Sterling Technologies. One of the most successful tech entrepreneurs of his generation. A man whose company had revolutionized cloud computing and whose personal net worth was measured in billions, not millions. Vivian felt the world tilt beneath her feet. "I go by web when I want to be left alone," Marcus said quietly. "Which is most of the time." "But you were carrying boxes." Lillian's voice had lost all its careful composure. At that agency building. Like a laborer. Delilah is an old friend. I help when I can. Moving boxes. Organizing files. Work that uses my hands instead of just my mind. Across the table, Margot had gone pale. Philippe looked genuinely confused. Harold set down his newspaper entirely, staring at Marcus with new eyes. Even grandmother Estelle seemed at a loss for words. But Vivian could not focus on any of them. Her mind was racing backward through every interaction, every dismissive word, every moment she had looked at this man and seen exactly what she expected to see: a handyman. A delivery worker. Someone beneath her notice. Why? The word came out as barely a whisper. Why would you pretend to be nobody? Why would you let me treat you like you were invisible? Marcus turned to face her, and something in his expression made her chest ache. Because I wanted to see who you really are. Not who you perform for clients. Not who you pretend to be for your family. The real woman underneath all that armor. And what did you find? The question hung in the air like smoke. I found someone worth knowing. But I also found someone so terrified of being seen that she would rather hire a stranger than admit she is lonely. Vivian felt tears burning behind her eyes. Not from anger. From recognition. You let me treat you like a servant, she whispered. Marcus leaned forward, his voice dropping low. No, Vivian. You let yourself see a servant. There is a difference. And until you understand that difference, you will never understand why I am still sitting here. The silence that followed was suffocating. Lillian was still staring at the phone in her hand, apparently unable to reconcile the numbers on the screen with the man she had been interrogating. Margot looked between Marcus and Vivian with an expression that mixed shock with something that might have been jealousy. Philippe seemed to be the only person at the table who was genuinely pleased by this turn of events. And Grandmother Estelle. Grandmother Estelle was watching Marcus with newfound respect. Well, she said finally, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. I suppose that explains the Stanford education. Something in Vivian snapped. She pushed back from the table and walked out of the dining room without a word. Through the marble foyer. Past the carefully curated artwork. Out into the garden where she had spent childhood hours hiding from family dinners just like this one. The cool evening air hit her face like a slap, but she did not slow down. She walked until she reached the old oak tree at the far end of the property, the one place on this estate where she had ever felt like she could breathe. She stood there for a long moment, staring up at branches she had climbed as a child, trying to process what had just happened. Marcus Sterling. The name kept echoing in her head, attached to headlines she had read and articles she had skimmed. One of the most successful entrepreneurs of his generation. A man who had built an empire and then, 3 years ago, had simply stepped back from public life without explanation. And she had dismissed him as a handyman. She had snapped at him for being in her way. She had hired him for a couple $100 worth of favor to pretend to be her partner. The humiliation was almost unbearable. But underneath the humiliation was something worse. Recognition. She had spent years building walls to protect herself from people who could not see her worth. And in doing so, she had become exactly like them. Judging people by appearance. Dismissing anyone who did not fit her predetermined categories. Looking through people instead of at them. She had become her mother. The thought made her physically ill. Vivian. She did not turn at the sound of his voice. Could not face him. Not yet. Go away. No. Footsteps on the grass, and then he was beside her, close enough that she could feel his warmth without touching. I should have told you sooner, he said quietly. When? Before or after I treated you like the help? You treated me exactly like yourself. The raw, unfiltered version that you hide behind professional distance and defensive humor. That does not make it better. No. But it makes it honest. Vivian finally turned to look at him. In the fading evening light, he looked different. Or maybe she was just seeing him clearly for the first time. Why did you do this? You could have anyone. You could have women falling at your feet without any effort at all. Why play this ridiculous game with someone like me? Someone like you? Someone who hired a fake girlfriend because she was too proud to admit she was lonely. Someone who judges everyone around her before they have a chance to prove themselves. Someone who... Her voice cracked, and she could not continue. Marcus stepped closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in those gray-green eyes. Someone who built an empire through sheer force of will. Someone who survived a family that could not see her worth and proved them wrong anyway. Someone who works 16-hour days because she is terrified that if she stops, everyone will realize she is not good enough. The words hit too close to the truth. Vivian felt tears spilling over despite her best efforts to contain them. How do you know that? Because I recognize it. Because I spent 15 years doing exactly the same thing. Building and building and building, trying to prove I was worthy of the life I was creating. Until one day I realized that no amount of success would fill the hole I was trying to fill. What happened? I burned out. Completely. Panic attacks, insomnia, the works. My body physically refused to continue the way I had been living. So I stepped back. Started doing things that made me feel human again. Moving boxes. Fixing things with my hands. Spending time with people who did not see me as a means to an end. Like Delilah. Like Delilah. And like you. Vivian shook her head. I saw you as a means to an end. That was literally our entire arrangement. At first, maybe. But I saw something else underneath all that armor. Someone who was desperate to be seen for who she really is, not who she performs for others. And who am I really? Marcus reached out, his thumb brushing a tear from her cheek with unexpected gentleness. That is what I am still trying to figure out. But I know I want to keep looking. They stood there in the fading light, two broken people who had somehow found each other through the most ridiculous circumstances imaginable. Your family is probably wondering where we went, Marcus said finally. Let them wonder. Your mother is probably already planning how to apologize for interrogating a billionaire. She will find a way to make it about her own discomfort rather than her behavior. And your grandmother? Despite everything, Vivian felt a small smile tugging at her lips. My grandmother is probably already planning how to take credit for vetting you so thoroughly. Marcus laughed, a real laugh that warmed something cold inside her chest. Shall we go back in? Do we have to? We could leave. Get in your car and drive somewhere that is not here. Vivian considered it. Really considered it. Running away from this family dinner like she had wanted to run from every family dinner since she was 12 years old. But something had shifted. Something she could not quite name. No, she said slowly. I think I need to go back in. There are some things I need to say. To your family? To myself, mostly. But they should probably hear it too. Marcus offered his arm, and this time, Vivian took it without hesitation. They walked back to the house together, and somehow, the building looked different. Smaller, maybe. Less intimidating. Or perhaps Vivian was just seeing it with clearer eyes. The family was still gathered in the dining room when they returned, though the atmosphere had shifted considerably. Lillian was staring at her wine glass like it contained the secrets of the universe. Margot was whispering urgently to Philippe. Harold had abandoned his newspaper entirely and was watching the door with unconcealed curiosity. And grandmother Estelle was smiling. Actually smiling. Well, Estelle said as Vivian and Marcus resumed their seats. That was quite a dramatic exit, my dear. I taught you better than to leave before dessert. Apologies, grandmother. I needed a moment. A moment to realize you have landed quite the catch, I imagine. A moment to realize I have been an idiot for most of my adult life, actually. The words fell into the room like stones. Lillian looked up sharply. Margot's whispered conversation with Philippe stopped mid-sentence. Vivian. Lillian began. No, mother. I need to say this. Vivian took a breath, then another. Her hands were shaking slightly, but her voice was steady. I have spent 32 years trying to earn approval I was never going to get. I have worked myself to exhaustion trying to prove I was worth something to people who had already decided I was not. And somewhere along the way, I became exactly the kind of person I resented. She looked at Marcus, drawing strength from his steady presence. I hired a fake partner because being alone felt like failure. But being with the wrong people is worse. Performing love is worse. Pretending to have my life together while falling apart inside is worse. Vivian, you do not need to air personal matters in front of. Lillian tried to interrupt. Yes, I do. Because I am done performing. I am done measuring myself against Margot. I am done apologizing for building something from nothing. And I am done seeking approval from people who were never going to give it. Silence. Then Harold, quiet, distant Harold, began to clap. About damn time, he said with a grin that transformed his face. I have been waiting years for someone in this family to tell Lillian where she could put her expectations. Harold. Lillian's face flushed with indignation. No, my dear. Our stepdaughter is absolutely right. We have spent decades making her feel like a second-class family member simply because she had the misfortune of being born from your first marriage. It is shameful. Vivian stared at her stepfather, seeing him clearly for what might have been the first time. You knew? Of course I knew. I may hide in my study, but I have eyes. I have watched you work 3 times as hard as anyone else at this table and receive half the recognition. I have watched your mother compare you unfavorably to Margot at every opportunity. And I have stayed silent because that is what men in my position are taught to do. He looked at Lillian with something approaching defiance. I am done staying silent. The dinner dissolved into chaos after that. Lillian retreating to the kitchen with a headache. Margot crying, though Vivian was not entirely sure why. Philippe attempting to mediate with French diplomacy that was completely out of its depth. And grandmother Estelle, watching it all with the satisfaction of someone who had been waiting decades for this exact moment. Well, she said finally, raising her wine glass toward Vivian. I suppose this makes up for all those years of insipid family dinners. Cheers, my dear. Vivian did not know whether to laugh or cry, so she did both. Later that night, parked outside Vivian's apartment building, neither of them made any move to leave the car. That was not how I expected the evening to go, Marcus said finally. Welcome to the Moreau family experience. Your stepfather was the real surprise. I was not expecting him to have that much fire. Neither was I. I am not sure anyone was. They sat in comfortable silence, the city lights reflecting off the windshield in soft patterns. What happens now? Vivian asked. What do you want to happen? I do not know. This entire situation is completely insane. I hired you to be my fake partner, and now I find out you are a billionaire who was apparently conducting some kind of elaborate psychological experiment on me. It was not an experiment. Then what was it? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, choosing his words carefully. It was hope. Hope that I could find someone who would see me instead of my money. Someone who would challenge me instead of agreeing with everything I said. Someone real. I was terrible to you. You were honest. That is rarer than you know. Vivian turned to face him fully. You should be angry at me. I dismissed you. I treated you like you were beneath my notice. I hired you for a favor, like you were a service to be purchased. And I deceived you. I let you believe I was someone I was not. We both have reasons to be angry. Are you? Angry? No. His voice softened. I am hopeful. That is different. Hopeful for what? Hopeful that this is not the end of our story. Hopeful that we can build something real out of this ridiculous beginning. Hopeful that you might let me take you to dinner, a real dinner, without any family drama or fake relationship contracts. Vivian felt something shift in her chest. Something that felt dangerously like possibility. You want to date me? For real. I want to get to know you. The real you, not the performance. I think there is someone extraordinary underneath all that armor, and I would like the chance to meet her. She is kind of a mess. I am kind of a mess too. Maybe we can be messes together. Despite everything, Vivian laughed. That might be the least romantic proposal I have ever heard. I am out of practice. Give me time. She looked at this man who had turned her world upside down, this billionaire who had spent weeks moving boxes and letting her treat him like a servant just for the chance to see who she really was. One dinner, she said. No promises beyond that. One dinner is all I ask. And Marcus? If you ever lie to me again, about anything, I will destroy you. Billions or not. His smile was warm and genuine and completely unlike anything she had expected. I would not have it any other way. The weeks that followed were unlike anything Vivian had experienced. Dating Marcus, really dating him, was nothing like she had imagined dating a billionaire would be. There were no private jets or five-star restaurants, though he certainly could have arranged both. Instead, there were coffee shops and long walks through Portland neighborhoods. There were quiet dinners at her apartment, where he helped cook and washed dishes without being asked. There were conversations that lasted until 2 in the morning, where they peeled back layer after layer of each other's carefully constructed personas. She learned about his childhood. The father who worked 16-hour days and died of a heart attack at 48. The mother who held the family together until she could not anymore. The determination to build something that would prove his father's sacrifice was worth it. She learned about his burnout. The panic attacks that came without warning. The insomnia that lasted for months. The moment he realized he had built an empire but had no one to share it with. And she told him about her own journey. The rejection letters. The sister who always seemed to succeed where she failed. The mother who measured worth in marriage and children. The walls she had built to protect herself from a world that never seemed to see her clearly. We are both walking wounded, he said one night, sitting on her fire escape and watching the city lights. Is that a bad thing? I do not think so. Wounds heal. The scars just remind us where we have been. 3 months after the disastrous family dinner, Vivian found herself standing on the rooftop terrace of Sterling Technologies headquarters. The sunset painted the Portland skyline in shades of gold and amber, and below her, the city sprawled in all its imperfect beauty. Behind her, she could hear the hum of conversation from the party inside. Marcus's first public appearance since stepping back from the company, and a celebration of a new charitable initiative focusing on supporting female entrepreneurs. Her initiative. Her vision. Made possible by a man who had seen worth in her when she could not see it herself. You are hiding. She did not turn at Marcus's voice. I am strategizing. You are definitely hiding. He came to stand beside her, close enough that their shoulders brushed. The board loved your presentation, by the way. My mother would be planning our wedding if she were still alive. And Delilah keeps asking when I am going to admit we are actually dating instead of pretending. Marcus laughed. We should probably tell her we returned the deposit months ago. Probably. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sun sink lower on the horizon. 3 months ago, you hired a fake girlfriend because you were too proud to admit you were lonely, Marcus said quietly. Now you are standing on a rooftop with a billionaire who fell in love with your sharp tongue and terrible first impression. How does that feel? Vivian considered the question seriously. Terrifying. Like I am waiting for the catch. There is no catch. There is always a catch. Not this time. He kissed her forehead, gentle as a promise. The only catch is that you have to let me love you. The real you. The one who works too hard and pushes people away and occasionally forgets to eat because she is too focused on proving herself. That sounds like a punishment for you, not me. It has been the adventure of my life. Vivian looked at this man who had dismantled every wall she had ever built and felt something she had not experienced in years. Hope. Real hope. The kind that does not need proof or evidence or guarantees. My mother wants to plan a spring wedding, she said. I know. She called me this morning. Vivian stared at him. She called you. We have weekly brunch now. Did I not mention that? You have weekly brunch with my mother. The same mother who interrogated you about your net worth at our first dinner. She was just protecting you. Badly, but still. Marcus grinned. Besides, she makes excellent mimosas. And I think she is genuinely trying to make amends. By having brunch with my boyfriend without telling me. By trying to understand the man her daughter loves. It is actually quite sweet if you think about it. I am not sure sweet is the word I would use. Progress, then. She is making progress. Vivian shook her head, but she was smiling. You are insane. I prefer committed. He pulled her closer, his arms wrapping around her waist. So what do you say? Want to stop pretending we are just dating and actually admit this is real? Are you proposing right now? On a random Tuesday evening on a corporate rooftop? I am testing the waters. The actual proposal will be much more impressive. Will it? I have a Stanford education and billions of dollars at my disposal. I can be impressive when I want to be. Vivian looked into those gray-green eyes that had seen through every wall she had ever built. Ask me properly, she said. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Right now? Right now. Something shifted in his expression. The playfulness faded, replaced by an intensity that took her breath away. He stepped back and reached into his jacket pocket. When his hand emerged, he was holding a small velvet box. I was planning to wait another month. Set up something elaborate. But you never do anything the expected way, so why should this be any different? He opened the box. Inside was a ring unlike anything Vivian had expected. Simple. Elegant. A single stone in an antique setting that looked like it had history. It was my mother's, Marcus said quietly. My father saved for 3 years to buy it for her. It is not the biggest diamond or the flashiest ring. But it meant everything to them. Tears were streaming down Vivian's face, and she did not even try to stop them. Vivian Moreau. You were rude to me the first time we met. Hostile the second time. Deeply suspicious the third. You assumed I was beneath your notice, treated me like a servant, and hired me for a scheme that was morally questionable at best. This is a terrible proposal. I am not finished. His eyes sparkled with warmth. You are also brilliant, fierce, loyal to the people who earn your trust, and the most genuinely authentic person I have ever met once you stop trying to hide behind sarcasm. I fell in love with you before I knew whether you were capable of seeing me as anything other than useful. And now that you do. He held up the ring. Now I am asking you to stop running, stop pretending, and let me spend the rest of my life proving that you are worth exactly as much as you have always been. Not because of what you have accomplished. Not because of what you can do for anyone. Just because of who you are. Vivian looked at the ring. At the man holding it. At the city sprawling below them and the future stretching out ahead. Yes, she whispered. Yes? Yes. But if you ever lie to me again, about anything, I am keeping the ring and selling your car. Marcus stood and pulled her into a kiss that tasted like champagne and possibility. Around them, the sunset faded into twilight, and somewhere in the building below, the board members were probably already updating their investment forecasts. 1 year later, Vivian stood in the garden of the Moreau estate, the same garden where she had once hidden from family dinners and questioned everything about her life. But today was different. Today, the garden was filled with flowers and fairy lights. Today, her family was gathered not to judge her, but to celebrate her. And today, she was getting married. You look beautiful, Margot said, adjusting Vivian's veil with uncharacteristic gentleness. Something had shifted between them over the past year. Not a complete transformation, but a beginning. Marcus is a lucky man. We are both lucky. I know we have not always been. Margot paused, searching for words. I know I have not always been the sister I should have been. Margot. Let me finish. I spent years competing with you without ever admitting that I was competing. I let Mother pit us against each other, and I played along because it was easier than standing up for you. I am sorry. Vivian studied her half-sister, seeing her clearly perhaps for the first time. We were both doing the best we could with what we were given. That does not make it right. No. But it makes it understandable. And understanding is where healing starts. Margot smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. When did you get so wise? I had a good teacher. The ceremony was intimate. Just family and close friends gathered under the oak tree that had witnessed so much of Vivian's childhood. Harold walked her down the aisle, his eyes suspiciously bright. Lillian sat in the front row, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief that probably cost more than Vivian's first car. And Grandmother Estelle presided over the entire affair with the satisfaction of someone who had finally seen her family get something right. Marcus stood at the altar in a suit that probably cost more than most people's weddings, but his expression was the same one he had worn when he was carrying boxes at Atlas Connections. Open. Genuine. Unguarded. I take it back, Vivian whispered as she reached him. This is the weirdest way two people have ever met. Would you have it any other way? Not for anything in the world. The vows they had written were personal and imperfect and completely honest. Marcus promised to always see her, even when she was hiding. To support her dreams without trying to diminish his own. To love her through every moment of self-doubt and every victory celebration. To never again pretend to be someone he was not. Vivian promised to let herself be loved without constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop. To trust him with her vulnerabilities instead of hiding behind armor. To build something real with him instead of performing a life that looked good from the outside. To always tell him when he was being an idiot, because someone needed to. The crowd laughed at that last one. Marcus just smiled. I now pronounce you husband and wife, the officiant announced. You may kiss the bride. And he did. Thoroughly. Let me leave you with this. Some stories are about becoming who you were always meant to be. Others are about finally letting someone see who you already are. The best stories, the ones that stay with us, are about finding someone who loves you exactly as you are, even when you are busy pretending to be someone else. Vivian Moreau spent years building walls to protect herself from a world that refused to see her worth. She judged people by appearances because that was what had been done to her. She performed versions of herself because she had never felt safe enough to be real. It took a billionaire in disguise to show her what she had become. And it took her own courage to decide to become something different. But here is the thing about transformation. It is not a one-time event. It is not a single moment of revelation followed by happily ever after. It is a daily choice to be vulnerable when hiding feels safer. To see people clearly instead of categorizing them. To let love in even when every instinct says to keep it out. Vivian still works 16-hour days sometimes. She still catches herself judging people and has to consciously stop. She still has moments where the armor threatens to rebuild itself. But now she has someone who sees through it. Someone who loves her not in spite of her flaws, but because her flaws are part of who she is. And that, my friends, is what real love looks like. Not perfect. Not easy. Not a fairy tale. Just two imperfect people choosing each other, over and over again. If this story touched your heart, I need you to do something for me right now. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. I tell stories like this every single week, stories about love and transformation and the courage it takes to be truly seen. Drop a comment below and tell me, have you ever misjudged someone who turned out to change your life? I read every single comment, and I want to hear your story. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that vulnerability is not weakness. Someone who builds walls because they have been hurt. Someone who deserves to be reminded that they are worth loving exactly as they are. And remember this. The person you dismiss today might be the person who saves you tomorrow. The walls you build to protect yourself might become the prisons that isolate you. And the love you are looking for might be standing right in front of you, waiting for you to finally see clearly. Until next time, this is Billionaire Stories with Mr. Lawson, reminding you that the best stories are the ones where people change. Not because they have to, but because they finally find something worth changing for.